are bright-eyed and bushy-tailed, I suppose. My name's Adrienne Maddock. I'm a 7th grade teacher in Chicago Public Schools, over on the west side, Community Magnet Elementary. Primarily Latino, was 97%, 99% Latino. And I'm actually here with my vice principal, who's very kindly volunteered to help me out. He has some great ideas as well. This is Mr. Matias. Basically what I want to do today is just kind of give you an idea of personalities of kids and how to talk to them, how to work with them as best you can. And a lot of times they are difficult, and there's no way around that. So I'm going to talk a little bit about the parents that come with them. A lot of my, you're a lot laughing. Also, the parents also can be as much of a challenge, but they can also help out as well. So I want to kind of talk a little bit about that. I have a few objectives, and again, I teach, so I kind of do this in a teacher manner. But one thing that I do want to say is, if you have any questions, just let me know. Raise your hand, shout out, whatever you need to do, because I do want to answer your questions, and I want to make this useful to you, because I have this knowledge inside of me somewhere, but perhaps I don't get it out when I need to. So if you have any questions, please let me know. The first thing that I'd like to do is to help you guys as the participants recognize and address the causes of the negative behavior that the juveniles and the kids exhibit, and also address those causes. The needs and interests, basically, is what it boils down to. And also recognize and address the causes of the negative parental involvement that can happen at times. What is happening, why is it happening, and what can you do? Finally, just basically, I know that a lot of people don't work with kids, teenagers in specific, and so how can we just be comfortable with working with them and going in, because the kids know. Kids are smarter than adults in a lot of ways. They know when somebody's comfortable with them, they know when somebody's there for good reasons, and so being comfortable actually will help a ton with your mediations. We're going to start out with an activity for you, actually. I'm going to give you just a minute to think, and this is your turn. What I want to know is, what has been one of your most challenging, perhaps, mediation experiences with children, or in general, working with a juvenile? And then also, what is your most pressing question, something that you'd like me to address during this mediation? So basically, if I can give you 30 seconds to a minute to think about that, and I'm going to actually write these on the board over here. So you talk to somebody next to you, you can write it down, you can think about it. You got 30 seconds.
Yeah, that's my mind. I have a lot of, yeah, I think I'm one of the case managers, and so there's just this one where girl wouldn't talk at all, like even talk, whatever, just with her without a parent. And this was something that experienced her in meetings, but couldn't get her talking. Told was such a, I mean, she was about 14 and a half. Wow.
All right, challenges. Yes.
Getting the parents to let the kids talk.
What's the difference?
Parents are doing all the talking. Others. Yes.
When it's a juvenile and an adult, I had a teacher, and trying to balance out yet continue to have regard for the teacher, but so they can kind of talk as
So
peers.
balance the respect level.
Exactly,
when it's-
exactly.
There's a definite difference there. Teacher and student. Okay, others?
Two freshmen in high school who got in a fight, and one guy did about $5,000 medical damage to the other guy. They were there with their mothers, who were both mad at their own kids as well as the other kids.
Okay, so having to deal with the parents and their own children?
Yeah, the fight was the big thing, though, and the imbalance of that. One guy just cleaned the other guy.
Okay, so you're most concerned about the parent balance or the balance between the two kids?
Between the kids. And they tended just to clam out.
So, the children who are angry and confused, I'm gonna say it's working out. All right, any questions? Oh, we have one more, yeah.
So two, if I could put it. One is just a flip side of the first one, which is not necessarily the parents are doing all the talking, but the children are silent, expecting the parents to do the talking. And or let me put it a different way. I think that they're uncomfortable talking while the parents are in the room.
Okay, so parents doing all the talking, children uncomfortable.
It's like, you know, if you could probably get them alone, you might get something different.
In front of parents.
Right, like they withdrew and all they say, I don't know, to everything.
Okay, we're all in a bit, perhaps. Yeah. Okay, questions very quickly. Anything that you wonder about, you just, about juveniles in general, personality, anything?
About the parents.
About the parents, that's fine too.
How to get the parent to stop berating the child while trying to sort of parent.
Okay, so the question might be, why is the parent berating the
No,
child?
I
or-
understand that, but I just don't know.
Okay, all right. Okay, so how to stop?
Notes count how many times you put that.
From your experience as a teacher in doing this, how do you think juveniles perceive what we're doing? I mean, is it a joke? Is it something they totally don't understand? Is it the history of, what their perception of mediation might be when they get it?
So, juvenile perception of mediation process. And so here and then here. And I know you guys have a ton of questions I hope to get to, but I want to make sure that we get.
How to engage the silent juvenile.
So that's seeming like it's a pretty common concept here. Engaging. Violence.
And how do you kind of find a balance between not just mediating between the two parties, but also like mediating between the parent and the child?
Okay, so mediating, and that's parent and own child.
Yeah.
Okay. Here's what I'm gonna do. I know that there's probably a ton of questions, but what I kind of planned into and hopefully will work out is question time at the end. For all those random questions, and again, I'll do the best I can. I don't have all the answers, but I will try and let you know what I've done or what I would do in that situation. I would like to let Mr. Matias talk for a little bit about some of these issues and also some of his experiences, because he'll be leading after that, and then I can kind of move on from there.
Good evening. One of the main responsibilities I have at Canoon is discipline. So we deal not a lot of horror stories, a few, nothing like the media portrays, at least not in my school, not in our school. We have a few incidents, but One of the premises that I go by when talking with the kids, and by the way, we try to investigate stuff that happens because we think justice is really important instead of a knee-jerk reaction to a teacher's complaint or to another teacher's complaint. Is trying to figure out what's going on. And so one of the things I've told kids, because I heard it and I think it's true, hurt people. Hurt people, you know, and they wouldn't be in my office if somehow or another they couldn't deal with the hurt in their heart and allow it to come out in some form of aggression with someone else in mind. And so one of the other things that I do is at various times I give them a scenario of a baby, and then I talk about experiences that they may go through in their early life that builds a castle around your heart. And so our job as mediators is to try to find that little door that'll get me to connect to the heart, to that little baby, that little boy, that little girl that's stuck there. And if we were real, we'd say we're little boys and little girls irrespective of our ages when you get down to it, except that we've had more years and more experience than they do. And so sometimes in dealing with bully situations, we were dealing with one that started almost in the very beginning of the year, and I had the parents in there again. I've been called by who knows who up here and everywhere and whatever, and try to have both of these girls in the room with me. And one of the things that I did, I went straight to common traits. What do you have in common? You know, and wrote those down for them. Hey, even in music, hey, even in this, even in that, trying to get a common ground by which we can then dialogue. One of the things, another thing is knowing the culture, you know. If you don't know hip hop, if you don't know Kanye West, if you can't talk about why they're putting rubber bands, even though it's, in our opinion, gang related, on the bottom of their pants and sticking them up, if you don't know gang culture, if you can't speak their language, then you're not connecting with them. And obviously, you want to connect with them and you want to help our society through helping mediate these situations. But those are some of the things that we deal with. Generally speaking, bullying is a big issue at school, be it through name calling or an elbow here or there, or just attitudes, you know, looking bad. How do you look, Nancy? Is that what they did? Oh, no, they looked at me like, well, explain. Like that? They stick their tongue out? You know, and so I've had kids who don't talk, you know, and you're sitting there and you're saying, how am I gonna get this person to tell me what happened? And so I will use what I've mentioned, you know, trying to find something in common between me and a person. If it's a bully thing, hey, I was bullied when I was a kid, and so I can give them some stories as they're listening, short and to the point, and then try to give them a question to see if they'll, okay, start nodding or start giving me some verbal or nonverbal feedback that we've connected. And then you move on from there as slowly as possible, but trying to get them to really open up that you can get here. You know, and for me, this is the big thing, it's getting here. Because if we can get them here, then they're going to start sharing the hurt and the pain. Another, and I shared this with Adrienne coming here, another AP from a school on the north side called me about a 5th grade boy who since April has been going down hill, hanging around with the wrong crowd. And so, you know, I had mentioned to her, you know what, something happened at home. You have, well, you know, the mom quit her job to spend time with him, but she's missed picking him up. Something happened at home. Do a scenario that you need his advice on, or write on a piece of paper something that he has to respond to. Try to get him to talk to you in that manner and see if he will then divulge what's going on, what's affecting him to that point in time. I have also found that when you have 2 gang members, folk people, sitting in the same room together, you know, I realize that the overwhelming odds is I'm not going to get commonality here. I'm not going to be able to get them to agree, so my job is to neutralize, you know, the situation the best way I can. Another thing you could do is, and I know I use it at school because probably 99% of the kids would say they're Catholic. And so one thing I do is, you go to church? Yes. What do they teach you at church? What do they teach you about the person you profess to believe in? Okay, do you think he or she or whatever you believe in, that entity would be happy with your behavior? And again, it's a strategy just to try to get them to understand that you're going to church, there should be, you know, a tie-in with how you're living your life, supposedly anyway. And so you get them to smile, and then you try to melt them a little bit, again, so that you can get them addressing each other. And you also try to hopefully eventually get them to talk to each other. Because a lot of times the kids that I deal with, they know what they did wrong. They don't want to admit it because of pride, ego, peer pressure. They want to seem tough. And with it, they don't want to back down from the conflict. And so then therefore, they're going to give you that image that nothing affects them. I don't care. I don't care. Well, somehow you did care because you're in my office because you cared about something enough to do something to somebody, or else you wouldn't be here, you know? And so when you think about this, the people that you're dealing with are hurting. The people that you're dealing with are hurting so much that their behavior has spilled over to hurting someone within a family or outside a family or themselves. And our jobs in mediating is not only, and that's a lot to put on people, it's not only trying to get peace, but trying somehow or another to get the individual to reflect here about how to begin dealing with the poison of hurt that's within them, and really all of us, in order to get this facilitating activity done. So that's just a little bit, and I'll let you ask questions, a couple questions that I can scan for. Yes?
So what's your success rate, so to speak, in terms of making a break, because we're building a bridge, I think?
I would say it's not very good at this point. I would say that our society is full of bullying behaviors on TV and in the news media and whatever. I would say I would term success rate when I don't have a student in my office for any reason whatsoever, when I don't get a complaint from a parent, and
You know, let me clarify.
I still do.
When you bring two students together, how often do they come to some peaceable resolution and you don't see them back?
For the same incident, with the same people, I would say maybe 60–70%. At the extreme, we have to put a contract, and I have contract, where they have to write out what they promised not to do, and then you hold them to the contract that they came up with, you know. And so I would say that, but I would also say that in the same token, that you got to stop the person who's, to me, hurt the most from going off on someone else and then on someone else, because they still haven't taken care of the cancer in their heart, and they're still hurting enough where others then become the target. Okay? Yes?
I'm imagining that sometimes you have kids who built that castle because it hurt so badly that they leave it.
Yes.
In which case, I assume you would not try to break down those walls if they leave it. I mean, what do you do in a situation like that? Because they're gonna leave your office, and then what?
Then what?
Well, do you understand what I'm saying?
Yeah, I agree,
The
and
hurt can be pretty big.
Yeah.
And
you know what, one of the things with me, and I was just on Amtrak getting a former student who came off the street to ask for help, and I sent him to a private school and I'm paying for it. One of the things with me is, I will do whatever I need to do if the pain is that great to get the individual the help that they need. Maybe not others would do that, but that's just the way I am. And some of you guys are the same way, or else you wouldn't be here, you know, and you wouldn't be volunteering. What I try to do is, if I know like Mercy Homes, if I know counselors, if I know of other not-for-profit organizations who are willing to step in and take the child the rest of the way, then I do that. I can refer them to our counselor and that group of people who then would meet, like the bully situation, they're supposed to meet once a week with our counselor on a weekly basis, and she's taking notes and she's trying to mediate it through that way. And so I I think it's really important that in my position, I know of other organizations in case I am inadequate for the task, I can go to others who care about it enough and would get involved in it. So yeah, that's a toughie because you deal with so much hurt. And if you look at data, like I was sexually abused when I was a kid, so if you look at data, any number of kids that you get, that's what's happened, and they're not talking about it. So then therefore, how do you get them to talk about it? And all I can do is, at times where it allows for it, is share a little bit of that so that they know, hey, I understand more than you're giving me credit for. Or if it's a kid with gangs, hey, you know what, 10 out of 13 in my family, 15 and older have seen prison. 3 are still in, 1 for 45, the other 2 for 6. So don't talk to me like I don't understand gangs. I wasn't born into my position. I've worked from, you know, and so I'm very grateful every day I go to work because I belong in prison if statistics were of any value in my life. And so you try to find that, but you never allow the daunting task before you of how much hurt there is stop you from trying to apply a little balm on the wound while you're thinking, man, okay, I know people, who can I refer them to? Who can I speak to that would take this child and try to work with them to the best of their ability? Yes?
When you have a child and their parent in the room, and there's some issue that they're in, you know, discipline-related issue, and you have a child who's not talking much because the parent's there, and there may be a fear, how do you approach that?
Sometimes we have to put the parent out, but we have the option because really in our position, we have the power to do that. And so sometimes I've had to tell the parent, you know, can you step out for a second? I really need to talk to them about something. You know, and then if the child opens up, and I, in my professional judgment, think the parent doesn't need to know that, then I will tell them that part I will not. But if it's anything that deals with abuse, I'm a mandated reporter, and it has to be reported, that's it. But anything else like, man, I had this girlfriend, and I'm like, okay, you know, that's simple enough.
Well, let's say it's, Joey got in a fight at school, parents had to come in, and now Joey doesn't want to open up. I mean, the parents need to be there for some reason in terms of his behavior.
Normally speaking, we will investigate before we bring a parent in. So I will have had FaceTime with Joey before the parent comes in. When the parent comes in, then it's a different matter altogether. All I'm doing is informing the parent of the incident, the people I've talked to, the witnesses, and then this is what the consequence is in order to try to get the student to rethink, you know, that decision that got him in trouble in the first place. And so since we have that kind of power, we can put the parents out and speak to the child. Sometimes it's the reverse. We put the child out to speak to the parent if we need to, because it's really important sometimes to isolate both in order to get something said and then bring them back together. And so, yes?
Can you talk about dealing with fear, a child's fear of retribution or some consequence for opening up, and any techniques you might work with, employ?
That one's a slippery slope because, one, you know they're going back into the situation and you can't be their protector from going home if it's an abusive situation or you think it is, or going back into the gang-infested environment that they're coming from, and you know something's going to happen there. I think that you try the best you can to be realistic, and for me it means, hey, what do you do after school? You know what, you have Boys and Girls Club, you have this other organization that you can get into. What I'm trying to do is, with their fear of retribution, help them find a safe place for a little while that they can go to know that the adults there care about you and will take care of you. The other thing I try to do is, in talking about the friendships that they make, the people that they're hanging around with, you have to make a decision if you can. And if you can't because you're surrounded, then you stay indoors. Then you can't go out. I mean, if you value your life, if you don't want to be in that kind of trouble, then you have to make that hard decision of staying indoors. That one's a slippery slope only because it's so much there that you can't really promise safety because you'd be lying to them. You'd be lying to them. And so you try to find alternative places that they can go to that it's safe, that they are protected. We have a partnership with General Woods Boys and Girls Club on 25th and Sacramento, and they go until 5:45. And so some kids who would otherwise be in deep trouble are there till 5:45 because it is a safe place for them to be. And they know that they're gonna be protected, and if someone's messing with them, then the staff there will try to deal with it to the best of their ability. Not perfect, because bullying still happens, but at least a little bit more safer than if they're roaming the streets because their parents were working or just not around. Just a couple more questions. Yes?
How do you maintain trust with the parents and trust with the child once you talk to each of them separately?
You know, again, my situation is different than your situation, because you're there for how many hours do you guys, it can be ongoing?
4.
No, usually it's one day, so.
One day, and you have 4 hours or whatever to make your impact, break the ice, and they go home and live happily ever after, right? Boy, see, your job is a whole lot tougher than mine, because they know that the next day I'm gonna be there unless I take a different position. I'm gonna be there on the continuum. I think that you have to weigh in your mind the benefits of whatever it is you're deciding not to say to the parent or to the student or to the child. You have to weigh it, because you have to be sure, and for me in my position, I have to be sure that if I'm omitting something, I'm not lying, I'm omitting something that the parent or the student has told me, that it's going to really benefit the kid. Never being unethical, but always keeping in mind that everything I say is power and has a consequence of its own when they're out of my office and into home. And so, again, that one is slippery, and you really, sometimes you trust your own instincts, sometimes you trust your wisdom, because we have lived a number of years and we've seen a variety of things in order to really give the best advice or suggestions or silence that we can, so that they can come up with their own solutions to what's ailing them. So on that issue, I would say you really have to weigh that trust issue, and whether what you are proposing or not proposing is the best thing for that situation. Because if whatever you're proposing is going to make it worse for both, raise tensions, I don't think we want to do that. And then let me say a couple more things. One, when parents are screaming and yelling at you, it's happened to me, so, you know, and it's happened to the other AP where someone is yelling and you want to take off your tie, you know, and say, well, I guess I'm going to prison today because I can't handle this. You know what I'm saying? You just want to, stop, respect. You really have to take into account that everyone is watching you, and they're the ones who are behaving this way, and you're trying to diffuse it. You know, I understand what you're saying, and that's why we're here. We're trying to bring peace. You know what? That's a valid point, but the purpose for this right now is to try to find some kind of common ground so that these actions do not continue to occur. You know, and you got to remind yourself that you're the peacemaker. You don't have boxing gloves and say all of a sudden, all right, that's it, I'm done. You know, you're the peacemaker, and so it can get pretty tense, especially if they turn their attention to you. You know, and you're not doing. And I've heard a lot. You're not doing enough, and you're not doing this, and you're saying, I know what I've done. In your heart, you're saying, I know what I've done. I know that I'm trying my best. I know, and you have to maintain it. And so that leads me, besides not answering in kind and trying to diffuse it, your nonverbals. You have to be a good actor and actress. You have to be. You can't. Your expressions can't be such that even though you're not saying anything, you're speaking volumes to the parent, which gives them more energy and more fuel to continue their diatribe to you. And so you have to non-verbally be at peace. How do you do that? I have no idea. Go to yoga, go to whatever it is that will help you to breathe deeply. I have no idea. But I just know that those two things are really important in order to diffuse it. Because they have a good point, you know, I agree, but this is why. Or set the parameters before you even start, if they allow you to do that. Set it before you even start, so that, no, you're gonna speak first, and then, you know, we all take our turns, because we really need to come to an agreement. We need to try, and you guys are gonna come to that agreement. I'm just here to facilitate. I'll say a word here or there, but really it's gotta come from you. You guys are smart. And I find too that when you acknowledge, you know, whether they've shown you or not, that there is a body of knowledge within the person in front of you, and there is valid experiences, you validate some of their experiences, that it has a calming effect on them, and they're like, okay, you know, and then you can get on with your job. Will it always work? Come on, this is real life. No. But I think it would work more times than not, especially trying to figure out how to diffuse situations. And it's really important. I know Adrienne's going to talk about the different kinds of parents that you encounter. Like one parent where, I'll say this one up front, okay? There was a parent who really got on Adrienne one time, right? Pretty not good, and she said, hey, you know, when a parent comes, can you, so it was a report card pickup, and had people watching, and I had a confrontation with the parent right before, you know, Adrienne, and so when I knew she was going up, I just went up, and she said, you're here too? And so I sat down, and, you know, Adrienne does very well in staying calm anyway. You know, I've not seen her get ballistic on even the kids. I'm sure she's had days, because they have a tough 7th grade class this year. But she's not. She was very calm and peaceful in it. And I don't know if they allow others in the rooms when you guys are mediating or not. But sometimes when you have those situations, it's always good to have backup. Someone where you look to and, okay, you're at peace. You know that if anything really gets out of hand, you know, the person's going to step up to the plate for you and attempt to defuse the situation. But before I leave, I have no clue that this was going on, and I want to commend you guys for what you do. One, because I didn't have to see you as a kid, which is good. But two, because I think that redemption and reconciliation are two powerful words in our society, and we need to learn to mediate the hostilities among hurt people who are hurting people. And this is what you guys are doing. And you, whether they tell you or not, and I tell the teachers this, you are affecting changes in people's lives. You are doing something that's valuable in our country, in our community in Chicago. You know, and unfortunately they write about people who are doing bad stuff, and they ought to be writing about people like you guys who are doing this stuff for the benefit of society in general. And so, you know, as an educator, as an assistant principal, I just want to take the time as I leave to really commend you for your efforts on behalf of our society, because really it's on behalf of our society. Whatever moves you, I hope continues to move you to make an impact on the kids that you're dealing with, and on the parents that you're dealing with, because it's really, really, really important what you do. So thank you very much, and I gotta go.
He's somebody I admire a lot. As he said, I've had some tough classes, and he's always there with some ideas. A lot of the things that I'll talk about today, I'm going to try and basically take what he said, add to it, and also try and put it into the mediation sense, because as he mentioned a couple of times, you really need time with kids. I mean, that more than anything, you need time, which I think is what makes mediation so difficult, is because we have such a limited time. And I think the one thing to remember is just that when you're working with adults, they have all this background. They know, they have logic. Teenagers don't have logic. they just don't. I mean, that's what it comes down to, is they cannot connect an action to a consequence. They don't know what their choices are. You may think that it's pretty obvious that they have this choice to hit the kid or to walk away, but to them, they don't hit the kid, then they get hit because somebody sees them as being weak, they walk down the street, they're gonna get hit, they're scared. And so I think what happens is you're working with a lot less with a kid. They don't have those options, they don't have those choices, they don't have that knowledge that an adult has. And granted, sometimes adults can be stuck in their ways, but kids will be even more stubborn than an adult. I was talking to Mr. Matias when we were driving over here, and they were saying that kids are more stubborn than adults. Because if a kid decides they don't want to talk, they're not going to talk. No matter how mad you make them, no matter how nice you are to them, no matter how much you want, they are not going to talk if they decide not to talk. And with an adult, you make them mad enough, they're going to at least start yelling. So the kid won't do that because the kid doesn't think past, I'm going to win this battle because I don't know what else to do. There's nothing else. I don't know what's going to happen in the future. I really don't know. So one of the things is that Mr. Matias mentioned was, well, a couple things. Number one is to break through that barrier. And how do you break through that? A lot of times it's just with smiling, with coming in, entering the room. What I'm going to start with talking about is setting that mood. Because a kid can tell if you're faking it. A kid can tell if you walk into that room and you think that they're a good for nothing and you really kind of want to make the situation work, but why did the kid get into trouble? They can see that in you. And it's hard for me sometimes too, and to really get past that, even with the kids that I know I want to help. The other thing is to distract them, to really start by talking about something else before you get into the meat of the issue, because a lot of times just talking about something else will kind of distract them enough that you can get in a little bit, and then distract them again, get down a little bit more, and kind of work through that process. But before I get ahead of myself here, setting the mood. Opening statements are very important, I would say, with children. I know that a lot of the examples that I'll use come from teaching just because I feel like I mediate every 5 minutes, some crisis. But I'm going to try and really stick to the pattern of the mediation and the CCR. The opening statements are really important to set the mood and the tone. Basically, as I said, as you walk into that session, if you're smiling, if you're showing some respect to that student, to the parent as well in relation, but I'm going to kind of stick with students, but I promise I'll get to the parents, and I'm saying students, but it's really juveniles. If you really come in with the attitude that you respect that student, you're going to really listen to them, you're there for them and you want to talk. If you come in with that idea in your head, they're going to be more likely to open up immediately. If they want to talk, it's just a matter of they need to know that they can trust you. And they will pick up on nonverbals more than they'll pick up on anything else. I think that as we grow older a lot, we start to kind of maybe become immune to minor sentences or a frown here or a frown there because we've seen them so often. But kids are affected by these things. A quick example I'll give is I have one student who gives me trouble. He actually got suspended today for 2 days because he swore and flipped off the entire classroom. But he actually one day had his, as Mr. Matias was saying, one of his pant legs pulled up with a rubber band, which is a sign in some neighborhoods of a gang relation, if you have everything on the left side or everything on the right side. And so we try and just negate that and just take it away, whatever the reason was. Usually I'm smart enough to say, okay, take off the rubber band and leave it at that. But for some reason that day I said, stop trying to act like a king, take it off. That one difference, that one extra sentence there. And a lot of it was just not really thinking, not really, and he was trying to, I mean, there was no question about it. The next day he comes in wearing a Burger King hat. Those little crowns. He says, well, I'm a king, I'm gonna stay a king. Took the entire rest of the day to get that Burger King hat away from him and to get him to take it off. And I did, I had said something, I had accused him of doing something that, and maybe not outright, didn't, but I accused him enough that made an impression on him. And it's little things like that where, an adult might be a little bit able to move away from that, but really a child will not. And I imagine if I will never say anything to him again because he remembers that. I mean, a lot of us can remember childhood, something a teacher said, good or bad. And we will always remember that. It just sticks in our heads a little bit more. So as you walk in, really, it's a hard thing to tell you how to do, but I mean, most of you know if you're here. It's you walk in really being open, just as open as you would be to an adult, and maybe even more so. I would say with any of this, do everything that you learned in CCR, learned through your training, and do it double, essentially with a kid, because they're going to need it that much more. For the initial statements, basically, it's a little bit of the same thing. It's setting the mood. It's also getting them to open up. They need to be respectful to you and to everyone else in the room as well. Parents would be the same thing. So what I did was I typed up some top 10 do's and top 5 don'ts. So I'm going to pass these out. Just pass it out. While these are getting passed out, I kind of want to say that in 4 hours, sometimes you're not going to get them to open up. Sometimes you're not going to get what you want, and that's just, it's a fact of who you're dealing with. And hopefully what you'll get from today is you'll get, even if they don't open up right then, at least they'll get in their mind what is happening and what, maybe they'll have thought of some choices, they'll go home and they won't do it again. We were talking about what happens when they go home. Well, with kids, yeah, every word you say, every word that's spoken in that room is going to have an impact on them. Every single word that is spoken, whether or not they come to an agreement or not, it's going to have an impact on them the rest of their lives. If they can get to thinking about choices and options they have in the future or outside of violence, outside of doing anything else, then that's something that can change their lives quite literally, because they know that those options are out there, and they may not have known that before. Top 10 do's. I'll just quickly go through and read them. Treat the child with respect. Okay, it seems kind of counterintuitive, especially if the child is not treating you with respect, but no matter what happens, I like at the example I gave. If in my classroom, I go in with respect. I say good morning to them, they need to say it back. Even if they don't say it back, I tell them I will always say good morning to you. Because it's one of those things, they may not show that they respect you, but if you're respecting them, they really are thinking it. Listen seriously. And it's one of those things I think we do, our adults do naturally. You kind of half listen to them, but you want to give them a lecture somewhere in the back of your mind. So, and they know that. They know that. So listen to them, really, really do, especially with a kid. Smile. Somebody who's nice, they may not have that many smiles, to be quite honest. A lot of the kids that you might be working with may not get smiles at home. They may not get smiles from the teachers. The person sitting across the way from them probably has never smiled at them in their lives. It's really a matter of just letting them know that there is somebody there who cares about them. Count to 10, that's for you guys. When they say something that might seem a little off, or you might want to either lecture or get upset about, you count to 10. If you have to set it as maybe one of your rules up front, for the parents, just to make sure that as a rule up front, just say, we want everyone in the room to talk throughout this mediation. If we can make it an agreement that we are going to allow people to talk and give everybody a couple seconds. If they say something and they're not finished, don't interrupt. And it's something that a lot of people will say anyways in adult mediation, but I think sometimes in an adult and child relationship, we do that, the balance of power comes away, it goes away. Because we want to give the respect to the parents. We don't want to interrupt the parents, but at the same time, what about that kid? And it's just, I think, a natural tendency sometimes to let the parent talk a little bit more. Even if you don't want them to talk, you don't want to offend them as much as you're worried about offending the child. You want to empower the child, empower the students, let them know they have choices. And a lot of times, it might take some pushing. You try and do what are your other options? What's going to happen if, do your worst case scenarios? And they really don't know. So the more choices you give them, the more you kind of push toward them, and that can be where the adult too can come into play. If you can ask the adult, what are this child's options? What are the choices here? The more the child has choices to make, the more that they are going to be willing to participate in the mediation and to speak up. because they're gonna know that they're not doing this because somebody's forcing them to do it, they're doing it because they choose to do it. So it's basically a matter of, you have the choice to talk right now, but you don't have to. If you really choose not to speak, you don't have to, and that's fine. But what's gonna happen as a result of that? And it's really making sure that they realize that. We talked about this before. Now, I'm honestly not sure what the legal issues are involved in this, but give that child space from other adults. If you can take them into a caucus by themselves, they need that. And, I mean, I would say almost 100% of the time that I've ever gotten a kid to speak to me is away from the parents. Now, kids can be good if you can get them to realize what they're doing wrong. They can actually be really good about telling the parent, this is what I did, because they understand they made that choice. The choice was their behavior. Sometimes the parents need to know that too, that the child made that choice to behave this way. Sometimes the parents are automatically thinking it's something wrong with me, and that will put them on the defensive as well. Demand respectful language and behavior. It's pretty obvious. I don't know how many people have had instances with that, but I know I have it all the time. I've been called more things than I care to remember. Teach and prompt adults present to teach. That kind of goes back to the choices. If you can't, like as mediators, we're not really supposed to make the suggestions and all this, but the adults in the room can for the kids. Keep trying. It's going to get frustrating. It really is, but that kid, just remember, no matter if that kid's stone-faced, they are going to be thinking. They are going to be taking in everything that you say. If they're staring out the window, locked off, humming a tune, they are still hearing you. They are still hearing you. So you keep trying and it's going to come out. And then celebrate small successes. If they say something like, I guess so, instead of I don't know, say, oh, okay. So it might be a possibility, you know? Just anything that they give you, anything that they give you, you take it. Because then they say, oh, whoops, my shell cracked, I let my guard down, nothing bad happened. You do it again, okay, it cracked again, nothing bad happened, and they'll just start to get a little more comfortable with you. At least that's the goal. I mean, once again, you're going to get tougher cases than others. Top 5 don'ts. And I'm doing this now because I think it's just important to do right from the beginning. Don't talk down to them, ever. Be very careful. It's something that condescending tone that I'm talking to a child. A 7th grader, a 12-year-old is not a child. I walk in, my students are all called ladies and gentlemen. If they start to make me mad, then they're boys and girls. But the instant that you bring them down, and it's true, and they know when I'm upset, when I don't, and I've told them, when I don't respect them anymore, I can't show them the respect I show an adult. And they know that, they respond to that. If you are talking to them in a way you would talk to an adult, they know that because they think they're adults. They really do. They think that they're as old as you are. They think that they know as much as you do, if not more, right? If not more. So the more you give them of that impression, the more you buy into that, the more they're going to respond to it. If they say anything, don't get offended. It's the acting. Don't get offended by them. Just act. Put it away. You're older than they are. You have this experience. You can handle it. They can't. So just take it. Just take it. Now this is something that, again, it's not something that you would expect to do or that I expect to do and I think better of myself, but you embarrass or make fun of them or let anyone else in the room do so, even if it's a minor joke, it hurts them. And it hurts, the most minor jokes to them are huge things. And so it's just you need to be very aware of people doing that, whether it's somebody, the parent who's maybe helping them out and who really seems supportive of them, maybe if they make that kind of side jab, there's something that the kid is not liking there. Side comments or lack thereof, those are important with adults. We learned through our training and we learned through our mediations that you grab onto those side comments and because they're saying something. But with kids, it's even more so. If the kid says, well, he doesn't care anyways, kind of under his breath, you usually try and grab onto that, but if it's not coming out, you let it go maybe. With an adult, it'll come back to it. With a kid, just really, that may be the only thing you get out of the entire mediation. You don't grab onto that and go. Because if they put that out there, there's a reason they're putting that out there. And it's something that if you don't grab onto, they're going to immediately give up. If a kid is, there's been times when a kid has come up to me, said something to me, I need help with this or whatnot, and I get so busy, I go off and I forget about them. And when I come back and try and offer help later, they don't want it anymore. They've given up on me. It's a shutdown in their instant. So the instant you don't help them, they're not patient. If you don't help them right then, they're gonna give up. They're gonna give up. And this is important to me. I love kids, I love teaching. I get frustrated, I get tired, it's been a long year. But one of the things that I love about teenagers is that they're smart. They really are. They have, especially a lot of kids that I work with, they have more experience than I had before I was 25. They've had more life experiences, they've made more decisions with their lives, they've taken more responsibilities than any of us can even imagine a kid has taken on. So they understand things a lot more than you might think they do. They're smart, and they actually have a lot of power in their situation. They're not, in many instances, if you think about it this way, they're not. They are a mini adult who can make these decisions and improve the problem. Any questions so far? I'm just going to keep running on through because I want to make, there's a lot to say, but please stop if you have questions. Okay, crosstalk. Talk. Types of kids. I can, for almost every single one of these, I can think of an example in my head. I was as I was going through, and I should have written them down when I went through, because now when I want to give these examples, it's going to fly out of my mind. But a lot of times you'll get the quiet kids, the ones who give one-word responses or don't say anything at all. Usually the cause is that the kid is embarrassed. I work with a lot of second language learners, and a lot of times they're just embarrassed to talk because they're embarrassed of their accent, they're embarrassed of saying the wrong word, they're embarrassed of being laughed at, or you really trying to say something important to them. I've had kids who have come up to me, and it breaks my heart, but I've had kids who have come up to me and spoken in English, I swear, but I did not understand a word that came out of their mouth, and I have to sit there and I have to say, okay, try that one more time. And they say it again, and I know it's important to them, but I just can't get it. And it's hard, because I know that student goes back, and I have to really work with that student from that point on to get them to talk again, because they're embarrassed. They feel broken down, they're embarrassed, they won't talk anymore because they don't want to have that same experience. And you can bet, especially if you have any Latino juveniles coming through, if they have a second language issue, that might be a problem. They might just be embarrassed. They might be afraid that they'll say something wrong. They might be intimidated. There could be fear there. They're coming in, they're seeing you as another adult, another presence in the room who's bigger than you, who's probably, or bigger than them, who's probably smarter than them in their mind, who's, no matter how they look, who's probably tougher than them, and they're scared. They're scared. No matter how much you smile, they're scared. They're scared. Distrust. This goes back to the issue of past experiences. You have to realize that no matter what you do, you're an authority figure to them. Any other experiences they've had with somebody who looks like you, and it could be, I mean, to break it down, it could be a racial issue. I've had students come in, I've had parents come in who look at me, I'm teaching in a Latino school, I'm white, and they've had experiences in the past with a white teacher who didn't speak Spanish, who didn't understand the culture, who tried to get them to speak English all the time in class, and instantly they have an opinion of me that is not true. And while adults might have the same stereotypes, and they do have the same stereotypes, for a kid, they can't even realize that this is a stereotype. An adult might at least realize that I don't like whites, for instance, but at the same time, and that might be wrong, but I don't really care. A kid says whites are bad. A lot of my kids with police, I have to talk to them all the time. Okay, the police are not all bad. They're not all crooks. They're not all this. They're not all that. Now they have horrible opinions of police, and a lot of them have never even met a policeman. But they hear stories from their parents. They hear stories from other students. They hear stories from their friends. That's all they know, and they don't have any reason to question it. So it's just something to be aware of when they see you. Something that you can do is you can have them, if they're quiet, if they're not talking, have them write instead. If they are not talking, they might just be afraid again. And to get them to write something down, even if it's just, okay, can you write just a sentence, okay? I know that maybe we don't maybe you're not interested in talking, but if you write me a note, I'm gonna go read this later, and I just kind of want to understand what you're thinking. I don't need you to talk. You can have that choice. If you don't feel like talking right now, then how about you write something to me? How about you just let me know, kind of yes or no, even if you can get a yes or a no on paper, and then say, oh, yes? Okay, can you just write one reason? And don't even make it a serious thing. Can you just maybe write one reason why you thought this was yes? Make them think in their minds that this isn't a big deal. You're not interrogating them. You're just trying to really understand them. Simple questions. Simple questions are good to start with. A lot of times we start with, okay, so what brings you here today? The common question. Okay, a kid's gonna say nothing, or I don't care, or I don't know, or I don't want to be here, or get me out. Whatever they have to say, they're not gonna think that's too big of an issue for them. So start with simple questions. Start with, okay, what's your teacher's name sitting in front of you? Start with, just anything to get them to talk. Because once they've said one thing, you can get them to say another thing. And just move on from there. Loud, abusive, and disrespectful students. Or, again, I'm speaking students, but juveniles. Basically, a lot of their issues are the hurt people. There's something going on, and they're using defense mechanisms to protect themselves. They may truly not have anger management. They've never learned how to control themselves. Maybe their family members, maybe whatever example they have for adults at home, have only shown them this is how you respond to issues. And they've never seen that there's a possibility of calming down. They've actually truly never seen somebody who's calm in their life. It's very, very possible. It seems impossible, but they may just not know. They may not know that that option exists out there. Self-protection, defense mechanisms. My background is in psychology. I actually went into teaching through an alternative measure, and I love defense mechanisms. I pick them out of myself all the time. And kids will project anything. Anything they are feeling, they'll put onto somebody else. They don't know what else to do. So anything they're saying about somebody else, it's about them. It really is. And they're trying to just protect themselves. They might be confused. They might really not understand what happened or what's happening right now, and they don't want to admit that. There's no way. They admit that they don't understand, and that makes them look stupid. And no kid wants to look stupid. No kid wants their self-esteem to be brought down. So really just, if they say they don't know, and I'm sorry, I've actually been sick for a couple of days here. If they say they don't know, don't get frustrated. Help them understand what it is. Take them for their word. A lot of times my kids laugh at me because I will deadpan everything they say in class. One of my kids, actually the same one, I with the king hat, he's a pleasant kid sometimes, but asked me if he could, what did he ask me? Well, I'll give you another example, actually. One of the kids asked if he could go home. I said, sure, after school. He wanted to go home right then, and he asked, sure, after school. Can I go, and the kid with the hat said today, same day, this happens every 5 minutes. One of the kids says, can I go walk around the school? And I said, well, you can go walk yourself down to the office if you'd like. And, you just take what they say and a little bit of humor like that is, they respond too well because it shows that you're listening to them, but it keeps that respect issue. It doesn't say, no, you can't go down. What are you talking about? That's just going to do a confrontation or make a confrontation. But to really help them really address what they're saying, because if they're saying I don't know, they may really truly not know. It is an option. Defensive. Oh, sorry. Let me back up a little bit. What you can do, you can explain, like I said, your expectations. You can explain if your expectations for the situation, how do you expect them to act. You may have already explained that, but they may just not be listening. You may have to explain it again. Tell them a reason why you expect this. Because a lot of times they may just think you want to cut them down. You want to cut them at their knees. You want to make them feel like a child. Give them a timeout or a cool down session is good. Say, okay, you seem very angry. Maybe would you like to step outside? You don't need to. Again, it's choices. You always give kids choices. It's part of empowering them. Would you like to step outside? you can stay here if you'd like, but if you need to step outside, go ahead. And a lot of times they'll make the right decision. If they've had a teacher who's taught them that, great. My kids can walk outside the classroom, and I basically have told them when they're ready to come back in, they come back in, and they make that choice. They even will ask to step outside sometimes. And it's just a matter of you give them the choice, then they will do what they need to do. In this situation, I would say 3 steps. If a kid ever becomes loud and disrespectful or out of control, number 1, you need to validate the response. You need to say, it seems like you're angry right now. Okay, we need to address this, and let's really look at what's making you angry. Then you need to correct it. Tell them what your expectations are, and then start to calm them down. It's basic mediation techniques, but again, it might be harder to really think about with a juvenile. The defensive and the kid who completely shuts down. Maybe this kid is the kid that I talked about before who tried, said something on the side, and you missed it. If you missed it, they're going to shut down. They tried, they failed, I give up, I don't care, they don't care, I'm not saying a word. It's a waste of my time. I'm not doing it. And they've shut down. So maybe they've tried, and they're really at that point admitting that you might have missed something. A lot of times they'll say, okay, I'm wrong. And they don't hear adults ever say that. So if you even say, I'm wrong, then they'll think, oh, really? Okay, so you're wrong, so this is what you should have done, and say it again. And at that point, that might help them. Again, the fear issue. If they've shut down, they're scared of something, maybe they're scared of the parent in the room, and we need to figure out how do you get past that fear. And peer pressure. One of the things Mr. Matias mentioned briefly when he was talking about what happens when the kid goes home is they get beat at home, they go out in the streets, they get beat by the gang. It happens. They're called violations. The kid goes out, if they run around with the wrong crowd and the crowd doesn't like something that they've done, they stand in a corner and get beat for a certain number of minutes. If they survive, they survive. If they don't, they don't. And that's how you fix it. You've shown weakness, that's how you fix it, that's how you get initiated. It's just something that happens. So if you've shown this weakness, there's a real possibility that you could go out on the streets and get hurt for it, physically hurt, whether it's in your home or it's on the streets. So helping them realize, or helping the parents come up with these ideas as a Boys and Girls Club or these other options really are important. If you find out that that's the fear, really trying to help them come up with the options of what are their alternatives outside of school or outside of mediation. Help them see their options, figure out what their needs and interests are, and that's basically the best way to deal with those. Is really to just get them talking again by backing up, figuring out where it went wrong, what happened that made it go wrong. Maybe it was something you did, maybe it's farther back. Questions? Moving on to parents.
Actually, I do have a question. I don't know. I don't know if the kid can and stuff, but based on all the said and do's and don'ts. So when he came in with the hat, was there a problem with joining him instead of making it like a power struggle about taking the crown off, or?
The first thing I did was I said, okay, his name's Omar. I said, Omar, I shouldn't have said that you're trying to be a king. What I see is I see that when kings do this, they put up the rubber band, and I said, regardless of what happened, if that offended you, I'm sorry, regardless of what happened, you cannot wear the hat in school, take it off.
So you set a limit?
Right. So it's a matter of, it's a matter of, you know, if something happened, even if you didn't mean to, if your intention is to really get them talking, sometimes you gotta take that cut down. You just do, and move on from that. So I took a step back, but I also set the limit. I didn't say, okay, now it's okay for you to wear that. It's not. The behavior was not okay. You gotta take it off. This is what I expect. So it's backing up, but it's also not backing down. You still have the respect in the situation. It's finding that balance. How do you find that respect?
So how long did it take him to pick it up?
Almost instantly.
Okay.
It ended up back on his head 2 or 3 times, and we just kind of, it was the second time it was take off the hat, took it off again. The third time it was you put that hat on one more time, you're staying after school with me for an hour. It's gone. So it's just, they'll test, they will, they'll keep testing, and that's the keep trying. Because I wanna give them those options, and what I probably did was I said, you keep that hat on, you can either stay after school or take it off. And that's what I usually try to do, sometimes I don't, but it's giving them those options. Parents. A lot of times parents are trying to be the protectors, that's their job, they're trying to protect the child. They love the child, they worry about them, and they also might be insecure that either you as a mediator or the child even knows this. Maybe they are afraid that the child, maybe they're working all night and they never see their child and they're worried that their child doesn't know that they love them. Maybe it's you who they're thinking, maybe they think they're a failed parent. And how do you address this? Well, they need validation. They need validation from you. They need validation even from their child. Maybe their child has gone home and said, you hate me, you don't love me, if you loved me, you would do this. And a lot of times if the parent really is worn down and doesn't have the option to do all the stuff that the child really wants, to let them go to a party on a Friday night where they're going to do something illegal that got them to this party, that's got into the mediation, then the parent is going to be thinking in the back of their minds, well, I needed to do that to show my child I love them, but at the same time, everybody else is thinking I did it because I'm a bad parent and I cared about them, but I didn't know what to do. I didn't want them to hate me. So it's a matter of trying to figure out where that insecurity is coming from. They also might be used to solving problems in the past. A lot of times, if any of you have teenagers, I don't, but I get parents who come to me and say, I've got my kid who, they used to talk to me all the time and all of a sudden they stopped talking to me. It's what happens when they're teenagers, and I'm learning that, and I can't wait until I have them of my own. But a lot of times they're just confused. They don't know why all of a sudden is this kid not talking to me, and they used to talk to me all the time. And what you can do is just validate. Reassure them that you see their good intentions. I mean, even if perhaps you don't really try and find some good intentions in there somewhere, because if they see any positive response from you, they're going to be more likely to back down a little bit as well, because they're not going to be so defensive toward you. Hostile parents, ones who are really aggressive, very angry, they basically a lot of times will need power, and it's such a strange situation. It's fascinating if you're into psychology, but they basically feel weak, and so they show more power. The more weaker they feel, the more power they need to show. And it's just something, it's again, this hurt people. That the more you have inside that's bothering you, the more you have to protect it. And they need to calm down. They need to. Now, whether it's you keep on talking to them calmly while they're ranting and just not letting up, they may also need to rant a little bit. But once they hear you talking to them, if you're consistent with that, most of the parents will calm down, even briefly. And then if you keep that level, just bringing the whole situation down by the tone of your voice, by the manner of your actions, you can bring them down. You have that power. They need somebody to calm them down. The child is only going to feel comfortable participating if that parent is calm. I mean, think about your worst nightmare with your dad coming home when you did something bad, and your dad going crazy on you, or your mom going crazy on you. And when your mom or dad is yelling and screaming next to you, there's no way you're talking. You might say something, but they might turn that yelling and screaming to you. And if they're already yelling and screaming at you, you don't want to make it worse. Just get through it. They're thinking, just buckle down, get through it. And so the parent really has to calm down. And just at that point is when you turn away from the child. That's the point when you pretty much ignore the child and you turn to the parent, because that parent, there's nothing you're going to get out of the child when the parent's ranting and raving. If you turn toward the child and start trying to speak to them then the parent thinks you're ignoring them, and it's going to get even angrier, and you're going to get nothing out of that child either way. So that parent has to calm down. If there are threats there, real or perceived, get rid of them. If the parent is yelling, there's some threat going on inside their mind, or not. Maybe it's another person in the room. Maybe it's the threat of their child being taken away if they think that it's going to be they're just perceived as a bad parent, that somebody's gonna take their child away. Maybe somebody's already tried to do that. If you have to figure out what is the basis, why are they yelling, ranting and raving. Prosecutorial parents, these scare me. Yeah.
Okay, but I'm confused when you say get rid of that. I mean, if it is very true that the child will be taken away, I don't understand what you're saying.
At that point is when I would do options, okay? The parents, try and somehow get that parent to realize that, okay, what are they scared of? They're scared of their child getting taken away, okay? Why does that scare them? They love their child, what's the best for their child? What do they want for their child? And it's basically, you don't know if their child's gonna get taken away. They don't really know, and so it's the, worst case scenario. Yes, this could happen, but at the same time, what's gonna help it not happen? What's gonna, kind of leading it away from that, because you're right, you don't know. But at the same time, that's good, because they don't know either. So, giving them the option, even having them have the option, oh, maybe my child's not gonna get taken away. Then maybe they will in the end, but at least you'll make some progress there. Yeah, and again, it's that bandage. I mean, you have 4 hours, you can't do much more than the bandage. Prosecutorial, there's a lot of negativity. If they're attacking that kid, saying all kinds of bad things, you're a bad kid, you've always been a bad kid, I hate you, I wish you'd never born, any of this, which happens, if it's happening there in front of you, imagine what's happening at home and in private. I mean, just imagine, right? It scares me to send that kid home. That's the kind of situation where I'd be scared to send that kid home. And a lot of times, I really be careful with that kid, and I really think hard about pulling that kid aside and making sure they're okay. Again, that gets to if there's an abusive situation at home, reporting it, hopefully you've talked about, yeah.
Would you be less inclined with your child in that kind of situation to try to separate them from the parent for a caucus?
Oh, I'd probably be more inclined, because I want the kid to talk to me, and they're not gonna talk in front of the parent if they're afraid of getting beat. And also talking to the parent can probably, those parents are probably not going to let up as much. So it's really a focus at that point on the kid, trying to keep them safe, but also trying to figure out what's going on, and pulling them away. If you can get them by themselves, and it might be a matter of, a lot of times, I mean, on the good end, it's a bad thing, but on the good end, when a parent says, I give up, I don't care, then they'll let you take the kid, because they don't think anything can be done anyways. So, you can get a lot done that way.
So if you do have a parent saying those kind of things, do you try and stop it? Or you just sitting there and letting it play out?
No, I would definitely try and stop it. And I would basically bring it down to an issue of that kind of language, that kind of saying bothers me, it hurts me. And I know, and again, this is how I would say it, because I know that you probably care very much about your child, I don't care about them. Your child is probably trying very hard for you, and I know that you probably are trying, or you might be trying, it seems like you've tried very hard for them. And just trying to neutralize it. I mean, you really would. And a lot of times I will say it bothers me, because I'm in charge of the situation. You guys as mediators are in charge, so if you've set that as a ground rule, you have to stick to it. And the kids seeing you stick up for them too is going to give them a lot of base when you do get them alone. What I would say is, in a situation like this, be careful, stop, back up, and think of the child's safety. Really don't reveal anything or don't push that child too much. Don't push that child too much. Calm the parent. If you help them see the good in the child, then the parent is probably more likely to calm down and listen a little bit more in the child. I will try and get the kid to say, what is something good you said in school today, or something good you did in school? Because if the parent can see anything good the kid is doing, it might help a little bit. A submissive parent, basically the same idea, but not quite as negative. They might be.
Want some water?
Actually, I've got something. They might just have given up. They might not be saying anything. They might have just said, you know what, the kid's bad. He's always going to be bad. Punish him. I don't care, and they've accepted the behavior. If this is the case, it's probably that the problem's repeated at home and they really don't know what to do. So at that point, it's giving the parent options. Where is this parent? Trying to help them think of options of, what have you tried at home? What have you done at home so far? Has this happened before? And if it has, what did you do then? Has it happened another time? What did you do then? And try and help them see, is it the same pattern of what you're doing? What other manners could you address this issue with? They might have run out of resources, so helping them think of resources. Well, who could you go to for help? Is there somebody at the school? Is there somebody in the community that you can go to for help? And what can you do? The child, and this is something to think about, the child may actually, in that kind of situation where the parent is submissive, might actually be abusive toward the parent. There are kids who go home and hit their parents. There are kids who go home and yell at their parents and say what a terrible mother they are, what a terrible father they are. And the parent, in interest of pleasing the child, will take it. And then it gets worse and worse. When the kid just wants that acceptance, all the parent is doing is stepping back and not giving it to them because they don't know what to do. So it's a matter of, at that point, it's the parent who needs the help. And it may, again, seem counterintuitive that the child has power over the parent, but it happens. It really does. What you can do is help the parent think of resources available, put the parent in charge. If that means focusing on the parent, okay, getting them to somehow sit up straight and take charge and to really take charge of the situation, really ask them questions about what's going on. And if the child is being aggressive, then calm the child down a little bit. Because the child, if the child sees the parent in power, the child might open up too. Because if they're saying, hey, I've got all the power in this situation, I'm not saying anything, my parent's not going to say anything. If they start to see that their parent is starting to get some guts and might actually say something against them, then the child might start to say, whoa, you know, my parent might actually say something bad about me. I better say my side of the story first. And kind of help them work through the child and work through, give them an example of how you talk to the child the way you would like the parent to, but not like the parent to, but how you think the parent may to be able to help the child. If you're talking to the child with respect and demanding that respect, if they can see the child respond to you, then maybe that will help them start talking as well. Set and maintain your ground rules. Take the child aside and talk again. I think you just have to take the children aside, because in this case, it might be a matter of if you take that child aside and with the thought in mind that this child may seem very powerful and very disrespectful, and the parent may seem completely submissive. But if you take that child aside, you might be able to still find that that child has a soft heart, and they really just want that parent to stand up for them. And if that's all they want, then getting them to actually voice that and saying, well, what does your parent do at home? What is the good thing about this? What would you like differently perhaps at home? Starting to work through the child-parent issue is probably going to help that child open up to you, even if it's not about the issue. Once the child starts opening up again, they'll continue to open up to you. Basic thoughts, overall thoughts. What exactly are they thinking? What's going on through their minds? This is general suggestions for crosstalk and caucus, and I'm kind of going to quickly read through these because I'd like to do a scenario with you guys, which I'll need volunteers, so start thinking and raise your hand. Children are often scared and powerless, so they do use defense mechanisms. And I wish I had the list of them all, but there's everything from yelling out, from projecting, from I can't even think of any of them right now, but most of the things they do are done to protect themselves. And just recognizing that from the beginning is going to help you a lot in understanding what they're doing. Children need to feel empowered. Most people take away power from them. So think about it, if you have no power of where you're going to go eat dinner tonight, then when you end up eating dinner at a horrible restaurant, it's not your fault. It's not your fault. Somebody else made that decision, it's not your fault. So if they don't feel like they have a choice in the situation, then nothing's their fault, so why should they care? So helping them feel empowered, being able to make choices, showing them that the actions they made before they got to the mediation were their choice, helping them figure this out. Now, to figure that out, a lot of times I'll say, okay, when this incident happened, what was going through your mind? And what was one of the things you could have done in this situation? Or even starting out with, what did you do? Okay, what else could you have done? What else could you have done? What did your friend standing right next to you do? Showing them that there are options for how they could have behaved will help them accept that responsibility and then move on from there. Because if they haven't accepted responsibility, then it's going to be very hard to get them to talk about it at all or even care about it. The children, again, as I talked about earlier, may not have the tools to understand what happened, why it happened, what they should do with it. They may be completely lost. They don't have all that background and all that experience that you or I do. When we're talking to adults in mediation, we can draw on those resources, those experiences that they've had in the past, and get them to really start thinking about all those options and choices that are out there in the world. A child, especially a child who's never gone outside their 10-block radius, which a lot of my students haven't because there are gang lines outside of that 10-block radius, they step outside, they get on the L, they're going to get beat up, they're going to get shot, they're going to die. So they stay in their neighborhood. They only know their neighborhood, they only know their culture, they haven't been anywhere else. So really getting them to, trying to feed them those tools, whether through the parents or even through TV, again, it's a matter of how can you relate to them? How do you relate to this kid who you have no idea where they came from, what their culture is? A lot of times, a lot of times I'll tell them. I don't know how it is to grow up in your neighborhood, but I know this, like Mr. Mattia said. I know that this is what happened with me. Is that similar to you? Or even getting the parent to talk about their experiences, or thinking about a teacher at school and think, what do you think their life was like as a kid? At least get the conversation started, because they're going to tell you that teacher had the most posh life ever. They grew up in a rich little neighborhood and never had problems, and that's why they're coming back here, is because they don't understand them. They never had anything bad happen to them, so of course they're bringing me to the court. Of course they're bringing me to mediation because they just don't understand me. So really, maybe even get the teacher to open up to and try and relate to the student, if it's a teacher-student mediation, or if it's somebody across the, even if it's a neighbor in a juvenile situation, try and get that person to bring themselves back to the age of the child and start to relate with them. We'll get conversation going. Children need to have think time. That goes back to the count to 10 issue. If you ask them a question, one of the biggest mistakes that adults make, I watch it all the time when I have presenters come into my classroom, and it's one thing that the only reason I've learned it is because I practice it and I practice it and I practice it, and it is hard. 10 seconds is a lot of time to wait. When you ask somebody a question, it's, for instance, I ask you, what is the hardest thing you've had to do in a juvenile mediation? That's 10 seconds. That's a long time for an adult to wait for an answer. It's long. You figure they don't understand. That's why they're not answering. So you ask it another way. Okay, they're still not answering, so they must not understand. So I'm going to ask it in another way. And then, oh man, they're really not talking, and now they're really shutting me down, so I'm going to say all this. I'm going to fill in all the empty space with words. And the parent might be doing that too. The person sitting in the chair next to them might have asked them a question and then started yelling at them because they didn't answer. And pretty soon the kid's saying, well, I was just thinking of an answer. I was getting ready to say it. They're not going to listen to my answer. Why do I even try? And kids need that time. They're not as quick on their feet. They don't talk as fast as I do. I make fun of myself in class because my kids are all second language learners, and I speak 100 miles per hour. And I say, you guys don't understand. You guys don't catch half the things I'm saying, do you? No. Okay, I'll slow down. I'll take it down. But that's what it is. The kids, they need that time to think. Just imagine their brains are very smart, but perhaps they don't have all the connections yet that you get when you are growing older to work as quickly as our brains perhaps think. And again, some of our brains think faster than others. I know sometimes my brain skips over whole concepts, and then I start talking in tongue for my kids. Children are wiser and more compassionate than most people recognize or acknowledge. I said this before, and I think it's important. If you go in with that knowledge, they're going to see that, they're going to appreciate that. The more you treat them as if they know something, the more they're going to act as if they know something. Because it'll be very easy to them if you treat them like they don't know anything, or if somebody in that room treats them like they don't know anything, they're going to say, okay, fine, I don't know anything. I tell a kid he's acting like a king, maybe he kind of was, but he was just joking around. After that, he's gonna act like a king. If you don't give him that chance, or if you assume anything about them, they're gonna act the role that you assume. You hear it all the time with kids saying, I'm gonna get in trouble anyways, or that person hates me anyway, so why should I even try for them? And in a mediation, especially with somebody that they've dealt with again and again, if that child thinks of that, no matter what they do, the parent is not, or the parent, or the neighbor, or the teacher is not gonna change their opinion of the child is just gonna keep acting the way they do, even act worse. Because they're gonna say, if this is how you think I'm gonna act, you just wait. I'm gonna show you how I can act. And it's fun for them. It's a game. They love it. They love to make adults mad. They love to make them fuming at the ears. It's a complete game. It's so much fun. It's like my mom used to tell my sister, because I pick on my sister all the time, if you just didn't react, then she wouldn't keep picking on you. But adults react, because you demand respect. An adult demands respect of a kid, and when that kid doesn't give you that respect, I'm going to react to that. And the kid knows that. They're smart. They know that that's what's going to happen. It's fun. It's fun to watch. And I mentioned this too. Past experiences with authority figures, even stories of interactions, maybe they've never met, again, a policeman, but they've heard stories, that's going to have a longer lasting impression than it does in adults. Because adults can kind of, if they've just heard a story about a bad policeman, they can kind of filter out reality versus, and they might kind of cloud their view, but it's not going to become a reality from them. For a kid, it might become a reality because they don't have those experiences. Very quickly, finalizing agreements. Reality testing, I went back through all my training stuff again just to kind of refresh my memory, and I found tons of great stuff. One of the best things was, and I think it was in the checklist of what you should do as a mediator, and one of them was, it was the kind of idea of distracting them. Find another path, and then get back to the issue. Build trust with them by asking a question that has nothing to do with the issue, and then go back to the issue. That's great for a kid. Reality test, they don't know reality. They have no concept of reality. They have no logic in the first place, so how can they have reality? So reality testing with them, using the flip side, trying to get them to actually see where the either respondent or initiator is coming from, where the adult is coming from, where the other child is coming from. Because they may truly not know, and to actually get them to see, kids will admit they have a if they can really see it, you can kind of, okay, do you see where that person's coming from? And yeah, I guess so. It does come out. It does come out. And it might take some work, and it really might take some pressing, but they will admit where that person's coming from. Now, they may not admit it unless they're in caucus with you, and getting them to admit it in the group might take a little bit of work, but they will admit mistakes. It's hard, but they will do it, because if you can get them to really recognize that it was a mistake, they're not very good at stopping. My kids cannot stop from laughing. If something's funny, they laugh. It may be the most inappropriate thing ever, but they're gonna laugh. If they're at a funeral and somebody makes them laugh, they're gonna laugh out loud. And kids they don't have that impulse control. So if you see them starting to recognize that they did something wrong, grab it, because it's gonna come out. It will come out. Don't let them sit there and think for a minute, because if they sit there and think, it's gonna go back in. So you really have to be aware of giving them that flip side, giving them that reality test. If you start to see anything coming out, push it. Don't push it too much, but push it a little bit. And that kind of takes some practice of knowing how much to push with individual students, because some are, or individual juveniles, some are easier to push than others. That's something that you will develop throughout the mediation. In the first 10 minutes, you may push too far. Okay, go back, try something else. BATNA can work, but may need clarification. They really may not know what the best alternative is going to be. They really may not know that, and if they come up with it, or somebody else in the room comes up with it, they may not understand that, okay, this is really what's going to happen to me if I don't do this. Okay, that's not going to happen, is it? And they just may not understand. So it will work, but you may have to really break it down. Okay, this will happen, but what does that mean? If this happens, what does that really mean? And really go into it. Simplest terms ever. Don't go into it and try and get complicated. Go to the basics. What is going to happen? Whereas with adults, you might go into the money issue and you might break down all the finances. With a kid, it would be a matter of the fact, just getting them to understand the fact that they're going to lose money would be a difficult concept for them. To say, okay, what's that going to mean to take that money out of your piggy bank? I mean, it might just be harder to do, to make them recognize. Be certain that the child feels safe. They may agree to something because their parent demands it, but they really may not be feeling safe. And that's something that's just hard. You might have to pull that child aside and just make sure, again, that they feel safe. And any time that you're afraid of something happening and that you really can't get that child to admit that they feel safe and they feel okay and you don't have that sense, it may not be something that you want to finalize. It just may not be. Because if the kid doesn't feel safe, it may not be worth it to the kid or anyone else involved. Be aware of your life-affecting consequences. Like I said before, anything you do in this mediation is going to affect them. It could, and it's kind of a scary thing, but simple comments will affect the student, the child, the juvenile. They're going to affect them. And that's just something to think about. If you sign an agreement saying that, or they sign an agreement saying that they're going to do such and such, just kind of in your head and try and get them to think, what's going to happen the next time in 20 years when something like this happens? Really understand that this is the building block for their entire life. How is this going to help them in the future? One of the things that's great with kids is that if it's important to them to have a good job, to have a family at some point in their life, then they need to recognize perhaps that the things they're doing now is going to affect them 20 years out. Not just the next week when, in an adult situation, what are you going to do next week when your neighbor comes back onto your property again? In a kid, what are you going to do in 20 years when you have another authority figure who comes and says, you need to stand in line, or you need to do this? What's going to happen? And so you need to help them think of tools to deal with this. And that may take a little bit more work. What's going to happen in the future when you're making that agreement? Really understand that it could be a longer agreement. It may not just be a week out. Really try and push it out a couple months, a year even, to try and figure out what are they going to do when this happens. If the child, one of the greatest things that I've ever heard from somebody who's taught me how to be a teacher is ask the opposite question. So for instance, instead of saying, do you understand? You say, what don't you understand? And the thing about that is, if you ask a child, do they understand, what's their response going to be? Yes. Whether they understand or not, it's going to be yes. They're not going to say no for the life of them. But if you ask, what don't you understand? Or which part of this agreement would you like me to explain a little bit more? Which part are you not quite certain the other person is going to follow? Which part are you worried about that they're not going to follow? Which part is going to be hard for you? Getting them to talk about it and say it in their own words is going to help you be certain that they understand what they're signing. Because you could send them off with something, oh yeah, I understand, yeah, that's great, I'll follow it, it's great. And they may sound completely confident, convince you, and they have no clue. And it happens all the time. And it's easy, you might be exhausted, it's easy to do that, but they truly may not have no idea. And probably I'd say even 70% of the time, they really have no clue what's going on. And again, it's just the knowledge, it's the experience. They act like an adult, but they don't have some of those capabilities that we have. All right, I have a sample scenario to give you. What I need is 2, 3, 4 people to volunteer. 1, 2. Need 2 more. 2 more. Thank you. Gonna make the workers work.
I think Cassie should do it too.
Need 1 more. Basically, I have a child, I have an adult, I have a mediator, and I have an initiator. Okay, what I'm going to try and have happen here is basically, what gets to be the guinea pig, based on a lot of I gave these 3 very kind people scenarios about, one is a teacher, one is a 7th grade teacher, one is a 7th grade student, and then the student's parent who's come in. And a lot of the issues in this are the ones I've talked about. A lot of the feelings that either the parent or the child or the teacher is having are things I've kind of talked about. So as you're watching, just kind of get an idea of how would you deal with the parent, how would you deal with the student, how would you deal with the teacher, and what might be some of the needs and interests that are happening here, so.
Am I supposed to like do an
I
opening
would
statement?
maybe do brief, just kind of say the word.
Hi, everyone. My name's Drew. I'm going to be the mediator here today, and if we can go ahead and just get started. Are you the person that brought this case
Yes.
to the center? Hey. Can I ask you to come on over here for a sec? What's your name? Help.
I will, they'll do the
Yeah.
kind of timeout pause
Timeout,
issue.
yeah. Oh,
Number one, no, you're doing great, you're doing great. Number one, what I would do is, if they're turned away like that, it might be a matter of, if they're, like, to pull them over, they might actually get offended by that, which is fine, it is a natural reaction, but they might, get your hands off of me. I've made the mistake of even doing this. Can you come over here, get your hands off of me? And it's a touch issue, maybe it's just, they don't feel comfortable with touch, etc. And so at that point, it might be, you don't seem too comfortable sitting with us. Would you like to sit over there? I'd like you eventually at the table, but maybe if you sit here for a minute, that's okay, but eventually come over and you can decide, would you like to come over now, or would you like to come over in a couple minutes, and just kind of maybe even get them to say, do you want to come over in 5 minutes or 10? What would be better? And that's kind of where I would start with that. And if they're not talking immediately, it might be a matter of, I'm going to come back to you in just a minute. Do you need a time to think for a minute? And then I'm going to come back to you and try and talk to you.
You see, now my normal style is to start with the child and to ask them what's going on, what brought them here.
Right.
So if you've got a situation like this, how do you do that? How can you engage with this
If
child?
they're not ready to talk, it might be good to give them that little bit of time and say, okay, I respect your space, but I'm going to eventually want to talk to you. And that's kind of where you set that rule. Okay, I see that you don't want to talk to me right now, but we have a short amount of time, and I'm going to need to talk to you in a couple minutes. I need you to agree. Is that going to work? Can I talk to you in just a minute, or do you need it 2 minutes? And you kind of just give them that choice. And say, they should answer eventually. 1 minute or 2 minutes. Not, do you want to talk to me? Because they'll say, but if you give them that choice, they'll hopefully pick one. And they will a lot of times. I guarantee it. But in this case, they might.
Okay, so what we're going to do today is we're going to talk a little bit about what brought all of you here today and maybe see if there's any way of getting this matter resolved. Before we get started, can I just get everyone's name?
Or Cookie.
Cookie?
Or no, Miss Smith.
Miss Smith.
Sorry.
That's okay. Miss Smith? And you are?
Maria Reynosa.
Maria Reynosa. And what's your name?
This is,
Hi.
Valerie.
Valerie? Okay, how are you doing, Valeria?
She's fine.
Okay.
She's fine. I'll speak. That's fine.
Okay. Well, at some point, I would like to talk to Valerie, if that's okay with you.
Well, we handle things at home. That's why I'm here today.
Oh,
So
okay, all right. Okay, fair enough. Well, at some point, I think it'd be good for all of us to just be involved in this, so.
well, I need to protect.
Okay, and I totally understand that, and I would never dream of getting between you and your daughter, so, what we're
Okay,
gonna
I'm
do.
gonna sit time out just for a minute, because what you did, you gave her that space, but at the same time, you never got her to turn around. So it might be a matter, again, it doesn't always work, but the best, if she's not talking, I wouldn't give up on that.
Okay.
I wouldn't give up on that. I would come around, and even if you had to come around and say, Valerie, do you need me to come over there? Do we need to maybe even move the table over a little bit so you can be a little bit closer? And just really kind of work on her, because at some point, she's gonna get so fed up with talking to her and all, that some word's gonna come out of her mouth. Yes or no, or-
What do you do when you have a parent who's just sort of like heading you off and saying, okay, we'll talk.
I'd look at the parent straight in the eye and I would say, as soon as I get Valerie to acknowledge that she needs to come to the table, then we can move on.
Oh, wow.
If I could say, the mother just said that she doesn't want the child
Right.
at the table.
Right.
So
And at that point,
I
it would
don't
be-
see how that is respecting their choices.
It would be a
In other
matter
words, the mother has clearly stated that it's her choice that she take care of everything.
Right.
The child knows that and has therefore removed herself. So if you give her 1 minute or 2 minutes, it's still not, it's not addressing what's going on.
Right, well, and maybe what I would do in that situation is, it goes back to the fact of who's in charge of the session. Are you as a mediator in charge, or is you as a parent? It might be explaining what are the reasons for you wanting the child involved, and getting the parent to understand that. So if she's saying no, then it might be a matter of, I understand that you may not want, but I really need to also hear from the child. And while you might not be respecting the parent has the right to walk out.
This is voluntary, right?
Yes.
Yeah.
So it seems to me that one would want to engage each of them about what's going on, not saying it has to be different, but engaging them about it.
Right, and what I would say is that yes, you want to engage that parent, but if the child has the answers, if you don't somehow get that child in the beginning, you will never talk to that child. And if the parent doesn't like, and this is how I would handle things. If the parent doesn't want that child to speak, does not like what you're doing, they have the option of walking out. But if their goal is to stay there and work it out, then you as a mediator have that experience, you have that professionalism to be able to appreciate what they're saying, and at the same time saying, I appreciate what you're saying and I want to work with you, but I just want to leave the option open for the child to come in and speak later. And,
What if you were to put a question to Valeria and said, yet presumably only she can answer? You know, if you would say, and I don't know if you can do this before you get into the initial statements, but if you were to say, you know, what's it like being an eighth grader at your school? It's been a long time since I've been at your school, since I've been in eighth grade, you know.
you could probably get into that. It may take a little while for her. She is actually at some point going to have to turn toward the table in order for you to get that. So it might be working little by little, going back, really paying her to look at you in the eye, and really, moving over and saying, it looks like we're not quite ready to start. Maybe even a matter of, it looks like we're not quite ready to start. Do you need another minute, Valerie? We can walk outside for a minute and come back in and try and start this over in a couple minutes here. Because if you want that child involved, you're gonna have to get them somehow.
So would it be okay to turn to the parent and say, in order to move forward, I really think it's important for Valerie to be at the table. Can you get her to the table?
I don't want to. No, I don't think that.
Very quickly.
Can I-
Sometimes, I'm sorry.
And
Sometimes, if you appeal to a person's need for help, so for example, to turn around and say, Valeria, we really need your help to help make this work. This is a mediation, everybody's here to try to make it work, and we really need your help. So, if you just answer when you're comfortable, to appeal to someone's sense of kindness, if you will. Then
I would definitely agree. I think it is finding the way to get the child to feel important, essentially.
and real, it's real.
I'm just thinking it's more of a process at the moment, and I know that it would offend me. I think we know the child's listening, they're hearing everything, and if we're not, they don't want to be talking right now, can't we just move this
Yes.
forward?
And I think
And then you
could-
give them an opportunity, they're hearing everything. They're
Right.
just not ready, they, kind of warm it up a little bit.
Right, and
Because it's putting a lot of
yeah.
focus on that.
Yeah, and I think that's the thing where Drew doesn't necessarily have to get her to and maybe I made the mistake saying, doesn't actually have to get her to do anything, but if, one of the things I noticed is when you said we want Valerie at the table, at some point you were speaking to the parent. And instead turn that to Valerie and say, Valerie, I'd like you at the table at some moment, maybe we can't do it now, but with Valerie. Is that way she knows that she is part of it?
Just real briefly, what I think is missing from our scenario that might be real for all of us is, this is not where a mediation starts. It starts in the lobby, it starts as you're walking towards a room, so I think there are connections that you make before you sit down at the table that might reduce some of what
Definitely.
Drew's having to deal with as a mediator at the moment.
Kind of joking around with her, being very friendly with her, she's walking
The way
in
you
saying.
greet
saying-
her,
right.
all
Oh,
the way you greet everyone, yes.
And I think that, again, that's that initial impression, and perhaps I didn't back up far enough, but I completely agree with that. You can get her talking to you before you get in. It'd be great, or saying like, oh man, it's a great day, women like to be out of school, you can get her to crack a smile. you know, wouldn't you like to be outside playing instead of in school today, or it might kind of crack a
Like
little.
you can offer like a soda or
Right.
like you want something to eat, you know, we got some junk food here.
Give her a couple options.
That's what I do, I always do that.
Oh, yeah.
Like, you want a Coke? And I'm like, yeah.
That's awesome, that's a great.
You as the mediator do that?
Yeah. Like I'll just say, you know, how you doing? You want something to drink? We got soda, we got juice.
I think that's awesome, I would write that all down, that's something I didn't think of, but that's for now, maybe talk about once, just to. Yeah, moving on, let's fast forward.
Exactly. We got some candy. Okay, well, so thank you for joining us. And so I think what I'd like to do is, in this particular situation, to get a better idea of what we're all doing here, I'd like to start with you, Valerie. Can you just tell us what's going on, what brought you here, and what's happening? Well, again, and let me remind everyone.
I think it would probably be better if I spoke, don't always talk.
Well, what's going on? And if there's any, at any point you feel like you're not comfortable, if it's gone too far, you know, we can stop at that. But I really think it's good that Valerie is going to talk at this point. Is that cool with you guys?
Well, I'm a little concerned about what she might say, you know, and I do want to protect my children.
I wanna
don't know.
talk.
You have to be careful. You have to say something.
Would you- Let me ask you. Let me ask you something. Would you like to meet privately first? Because we can meet privately.
Who?
You, Valerie, and myself, and we can chat about what's going to be talked about beforehand. If
No,
that's
I don't
okay.
want her.
Well, again,
Do you want me to say what brought us here? Or are we gonna just keep waiting for her?
well.
You know, it's very funny because she can talk a lot in class, but right now we're at the table, she doesn't talk at all. But in
No,
class, all she does is talk.
Okay. Before we move forward down there, I always like to start with the juveniles in these kinds of cases. And you are definitely going to have your opportunity, okay? So, again, that's an opportunity for you. If you'd like to meet privately with me, just us three, then we can talk a little bit about what she's going to say in the larger group. Would that be okay? Would you feel comfortable with that? Okay.
I think that's great, because you addressed her issue there. One of the things is, she said something that was kind of blown over, and again, that might get back to you. And it's hard to catch, but it seems like you can go back to it, but the instant, she's in her mind thinking that she's always picking on me. And nobody heard that, nobody cares, so I'm gonna shut up again. So, again, it might be a matter of, okay, I heard that you're always getting picked on, let's talk about that in a minute, and then going back, just to
Okay.
make sure that she got that. And I think you do great with picking on, having the juvenile talk first. I think that's awesome, because it is the most important part of what you want to do. And when you have a hostile parent,